Yo, what's going on, everybody? First of all, I want to apologize and say sorry. This episode took so long to make. I kind of got a little bit lazy. I kind of got backtracked on it, but I'm here. I'm ready to do the review video on the latest episode of The Mandalorian, and I promise in the future, I'm going to make these videos a lot more sooner and more consistent, so that way too much time doesn't pass by and this whole thing becomes irrelevant. But anyway, let's get straight to the review of the latest episode of The Mandalorian titled The Believer. And all I gotta say, man, is that keep getting better and better as the season goes on. Like the beginning, the first couple of episodes kind of dragged on and felt a little bit fillerish, but now stuff is starting to pick up, man. Like stuff is starting to get real cool, real actiony, real deep on an emotional level with the show, man. They are just knocking it out the park with dingers every episode that's been coming out. So anyway, I love this episode. Like, I thought I loved the Ahsoka episode, and then I thought I loved the last episode with the reveal of Boba Fett, but this episode, holy crap, I love this one on a completely different level. Like, okay, so when it comes to the world of Star Wars or the lore of Star Wars, we're always kind of focusing on Jedi and Sith and the Force and all that stuff and all these crazy planets and different creatures. And, you know, the drama between the Skywalker family and all their crap and how they ruined the universe. But sometimes we forget there's a whole different element to Star Wars that kind of sits on the bottom, and that's the war element. That's the war element of Star Wars. I mean, it's in the name, right? And I think there's two mediums of Star Wars that really touched up on that. That's A, Clone Wars, and B, Rogue One. Like, those shows show you that aside from all the mythical and space wizards and all that stuff and magical powers, that there's a war going on in this universe, in this galaxy. There is a war going on between two sides, the Empire and the Rebellion. You know, and whether you're on the good side or on the bad side, you sometimes forget that there's casualties of war, you know? And what I thought was really crazy about this episode is that it shows that. It focuses more on that stuff, on how there can be a lot of casualties of war when there's two sides fighting, you know, when they're fighting for power and all the people in between who kind of get caught up in that kind of stuff. And this episode really shined on a lot of that, where, you know, Mando and the crew, they go to this planet where they're going to try to infiltrate an Imperial foundry, so that way they can find where Moff Gideon is, so they can see where they can find Grogu and rescue him. And while they're there, you know, they're devising this whole plan to get in. They're trying to see how they're going to do it. And then they finally decide, all right, we're going to infiltrate by sneaking up on some stormtroopers, stealing their armor, and disguising ourselves as them. And as they do that, they steal a transport vehicle full of this explosive mineral, highly explosive stuff. But as they're going through and they're going on this convoy, they're passing through these villages and they're seeing the native people there, and they're just looking at them and they're just beaten to hell. The morale is down. They have no will to live. They are just a beaten group of people. Mando's looking at it, and I think he kind of sees himself in that, because at one point he was a casualty of war. Like, his planet had been infiltrated by the Empire and they killed all of his people. They ravaged his village, they killed his family, and he himself was a refugee. So I think he kind of saw himself in these people as they were passing by. And as they're passing by, you know, Bill Burr, who they got off the prison planet, that junkyard planet in the beginning of the episode, he starts asking him, he's like, hey, so what's your rule? You know, like, what's your code? You know, is it to take off your helmet or to never take it off, or you just can't show your face? Because, you know, there's a difference, right? You know, there's a difference between those two ideologies. So which one is it? Do you never take off your helmet, or do you never show your face? Because apparently it can't be the latter, because you just took off your helmet to be disguised as a stormtrooper. So it must be a face thing. So Mando starts to like let that sink in and starts to kind of question his morals. He starts to think like, all right, why do I follow this code? Or what is the meaning of the code of the Mandalorians? Like, what is it? So he starts to kind of question himself right there. So that's a little bit of character development that I like that we saw in that. And first of all, let's go back to the whole Bill Burr thing. Bill Burr killed it in this episode. He absolutely killed it. For a guy who's a Star Wars hater, he put on a grade A performance in this episode, man. Like, holy crap, he killed it. Not only was he funny, but he had some really deep dialogue that made me think, like, holy crap, like, dude's touching on some really crazy stuff. And going forward into the episode, once they kind of get into the Imperial Foundry, and then they go in and they finally infiltrate, they come across this Imperial officer, because Bill Burr's character was stated in the past that he was a part of the Empire and he was a soldier, and he had to partake in a couple of campaigns with them, were a couple of things that he wasn't proud of. And then he realizes there was an officer there who he served under, and he's like, I don't know, man. I don't know if we can go in here. He might recognize me, but they go through with it anyway. Mando, he's like, you know what, fine. If you don't want to go in there because you feel like these people are going to recognize you, then screw it. I'm going to go in there. And this is where Mando kind of has a little moral dilemma with himself, where he's like, in order to find the coordinates to where Moff Gideon's Star Destroyer is, I got to take off my helmet, because this device has a facial recognition thing. So if this child really means that much to me, I got to break my rule. I got to break my rule of showing my face. And he goes through with it. That was dope, man. That was dope. That is character development right there. Like, the one thing that he lived by for almost a whole season and a half, he finally broke it. Not because of, because of necessity. He broke it. He broke his rule because of necessity, because he was doing a selfless act, and he said, you know what? I'm going to put myself to the side, and I'm going to do it for this child. If it's going to get me closer to saving this kid, I'm going to do it. So once that all goes down, the Imperial officer comes up to him, because he's very suspicious of Mando. He's suspicious of him. He's suspicious of Bill Burr. He's all like, hey, you guys don't look like you belong here. So I'm going to start interrogating you guys, asking you all these questions that only military men would know. Obviously, Mando not knowing a damn thing, because he's not a part of that. Bill Burr kind of sticks up for him and kind of speaks for him on that aspect. And he tries to get him out of that whole situation, but the officer's just not having it. He's just not having it. He's like, you know what? How about this, fellas? Let's sit down and let's have a couple of drinks. And as that's going down, I guess Bill Burr, his character, starts to kind of have like a revelation right then and there, right on the spot. And he's just asking the Imperial officer, like, he's like, yeah, I served under these campaigns. He's like, oh yeah, well, I was there too. So they start sharing war stories and stuff like that. And as Bill Burr starts to talk about it, he starts to talk about all the war crimes he had to commit while serving under this officer. And he's just like, there's a lot of good people who died, a lot of good, brothers in arms who had to die for the greater cause of the Empire. He's like, was it worth it? Like, was it all this death and chaos worth the effort? And, the officer, who's super smug and he's super proud of himself, man, this guy is just like, I don't care. You know what? For the greater good, hell yeah, all those sacrifices were worth it. And you can see there's a conflict in Bill Burr's character, where he's just like, he's thinking to himself and he's starting to contemplate. He's like, this guy's really saying that all these deaths were for the greater cause, for the cause of the Empire. And you could just see him getting really emotional with that. And I think right there, he just has an epiphany. He's like, you know what? Screw this. And there's like this really dark scene that I love, because it's so, the tension is just so sharp in this scene, where you don't know what's going to happen and you kind of know what's going to happen. And Bill Burr just like, screw it, man. Whips out his pistol and shoots him point blank in the chest in front of a whole lot of other Imperial officers and a whole bunch of other stormtroopers. So Mando and Bill Burr, they realize they are screwed, and there's only one way to get out, and that's through a classic shootout, a classic, Western shootout, where the two heroes just got to shoot their way out of there and survive somehow. So I really like that. So there's a lot of action in this thing, man. There's just so much action. It's just so deep on an emotional level. Like, I just it was awesome. This whole episode awesome, and a couple of other key points that I didn't mention earlier, which I thought it was dope. You know, Boba Fett got his armor like fresh new paint job, so Boba Fett's looking cool again. You know, they brought some old characters back, so Mando's not going on solo missions and stuff like that. And at the end of the episode, you know, once Mando finds the coordinates to where Moff Gideon is, and he has access to send him a message, he sends him a really dark message where he's like, "Yo," it was like some Taken stuff. He's like, "I know where you are. I'm gonna find you. You know, like that child that you have means a lot to me. You know, so." He warns him with that kind of thing, and you're just like, damn, Mando ain't playing around, man. He wants his little Grogu back. He wants his little green homie back, and he's willing to do anything to get him. So that was dope, man. I loved it. I love that so much. So yeah, that was pretty much the episode. You know, there's a whole lot of things I missed out on, but I didn't want to make this video too long, so I just kind of hit on the cliff notes and what I thought was really important and what happened. So yeah, you know, do the whole YouTube thing, you know, comment, like, subscribe, share, whatever you want to do with this video, man. And that's the end. I have spoken, and remember, keep watching Star Wars.